One of the huge problems I think that we have both with the left and the right nowadays, and this is where I see the role of the arts and the bridge of the arts, is that they can't speak to one another. Hermann Hesse has a wonderful line, which is embrace, come what may, the whole world into your own soul, into your own heart. And, and that's the idea, to become whole, it includes embracing the ideas that are opposite to you.
Welcome to the very first ever episode of the Yellow Van Stories. I'm your host and driver, Bastian. If you are nearly as excited as I am, then you must be, well, quite excited. We have been waiting just for you and kept you a seat by the window side. Feel free to order any imaginary beverage that strikes your fancy. Fonsi's in first gear already, and we are good to go. So buckle up and get comfortable, because today we're meeting the wonderful man who wrote the song you've just been listening to, in Berlin. Here with me today for the Yellow Van Stories is my very good friend Jim Kroft. I'm very happy to have you here, Jim. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me, Basti.
How is that for a formal invitation or a formal introduction?
It's always like that between us.
Yeah, true story. Anyway, how have you been keeping up? How have you been doing?
I'm doing very well. It's been obviously there's been so much going on this year, and so much sort of collective experience that we can all identify with together. And I'm based in Berlin, and I sort of just have a gratitude for living in such a wonderful city. And of course, at the moment, it's has emerged out of lockdown. And that's, it's a lovely feeling to be able to get out and about and to see some people again.
Well, we're going to get into that just now, because I did write a little bit of what I used to call until now a CV. It's nothing like that, really. It's more like an introduction, really. But I wrote one for you as well. And I will get into all of that and why you most probably missed things during lockdown quite a bit in just a second. But we got to start with the most important thing. What drink did you pour yourself?
Well, I wanted, as is our custom, to make a ritual of it. So I will open my Bayreuther Helles now. Let's see if you get the sound effect. There you go.
Oh my God. I mean, you can sell that to beer companies. Honestly, I'm sure you can. That was just such a clear and beautiful sound. It was right in my face, basically. I'm like, wow, why did I not pour myself a beer? That would have been such a great and simple idea.
It's nice. I'm just reading the back, and it's Bayerisches Hell, ehrlich, frisch, würzig, aus dem Bayreuther Brauhaus. And now I'm going to take my first sip of this wonderful drink.
My word, that was also just such a great sound effect you did. Amazing, really. I'm sold. I mean, this could be a radio advertisement for beer, any beer, even for Corona beer. It would sell after that. I'm saying that. I'm calling it.
They've had pech. They've been unlucky with that.
Yeah, well, let's see if they get any communications manager to get them out of that ditch. I mean, really. That'll be one of the many interesting episodes of the summer.
Well, absolutely.
So just because you're asking, I just poured myself a Lagavulin. A Lagavulin. Can you believe it? Because I thought, you are Scottish, because I still believe you that you are Scottish, even though I've never seen any living proof for that.
Aye.
But Nice try.
Well, you've always been a little bit skeptical about that, haven't you, Bastian? Aye.
That's pretty good. Now you could really be a character out of a Guy Ritchie movie.
After all of these years, I've finally got that from you. Like, that's a first. You know?
I mean, that was really quite convincing. I mean, you're good with the sounds today. Really, you're good with the sounds.
I've been practicing quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, really, you sound like the supervillain out of a Guy Ritchie movie. Just saying, but it's very convincing.
Well, I feel like a supervillain, but in my head, it's more like a Marvel supervillain.
That would also totally make sense. I just haven't seen a Scottish Marvel's, supervillain.
Well, look,
really. They should work on that, though.
I am available if anyone's there are any scouts out there looking for Scottish arch villains for the next Marvel.
I was about to say, I mean, with that and the beer advertisement, I think you could just settle down and retire now.
I never knew.
It's done. But it's done. Just in the course of this podcast, you have basically, it's done. You can retire now.
You're
welcome.
I never knew that it was just such a commercial broadcast, Basti. Like
it is now. I didn't know, but it is now, definitely. We just turned it into a money-making machine.
Wow,
that's what we have.
I could feel the dollars flowing in, like getting
totally. Wait, hold on. That's a PayPal email I just got. Anyway, so now that we have the drinks out of the way. Mm-hmm. Yes, Lagavulin. It's nice how it warms your mouth.
Well, I haven't drunk mine already, just to be clear.
Okay. We got a long way to go then, I suppose. I hope you have a second one or third one in the fridge.
I do. There might be a little bit of silence, but when we're talking, I think both of us blabber at each other for so long that I can just leave you talking and trust that you'll still be speaking a minute later, and I can grab my beer.
That's a good idea. I'm trying to just step out of character for this and let you do the main talking. Already in the beginning, I have a feeling I might really fail with that.
Oh, it was definitely a case of projection there.
I think both of us. That's fair enough.
Yeah, mutually assured projection.
Yeah, exactly. So now that we got the drinks out of the way, where are you right now? You at home?
Yes, I'm at my flat in Berlin.
Can you describe your environment a little bit, like the room that you're sitting in?
The room I'm sitting in is a home office, and it's a beautiful room. And so I I'm a member of a wonderful co-working space in Berlin where I sort of go sort of, daily, but when I'm working there, it's a much more stripped down setup. Obviously, I'm not taking my musical gear there on the music side, and on the film side, I'm working off hard drives there. But here, so if I'm looking at my desk, I've got my sort of lovely monitor and my laptop and a couple of big sort of monitor speakers, and all around the room are various instruments of all sorts. So
basically, what you're saying is you mean business.
I mean business. I'm in business mode, Basti.
Yeah, something that we'll also get into in the course of this introduction, if I ever get to it. What's your favorite thing in that room? If you had to pick anything, what would be your favorite thing in the room?
Well, that is a very good question. I would have to say it's my.
I came up with that myself.
Well, carry on in that inspiring direction. I would have to say it's my Taylor acoustic guitar, which I've probably written just about the majority of the songs I ever wrote on, and it just has so much history. But it's what a wonderful thing, because I guess you could say it's a sort of relatively expensive guitar, but it's played so many gigs. I mean, I play a lot of electric guitar as well, and but it's played so many gigs, so it's one of these sort of precious old things. But it's not like a sort of museum piece. It really lives. It continues to live, and it gets new scars and wounds and battered about the place. But like a sort of wonderful elderly person that you meet full of wisdom, the more experience it accumulates, somehow the better it sounds. So.
That's a wonderful analogy. I like that. I can just kind of picture that guitar. I know that I have seen it somewhere before. It's not like that close to my memory now, though, because I have been in that flat a lot of times. Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot for that.
Well, it's your Berlin home, Basti.
Yeah, exactly. And I am all the more blessed to have it. Thank you very much. Now, don't make me cry. already after just 8 minutes.
I should point out to the listeners that, be careful about inviting Bastian Fisher into your home, because it may be that he's still there 6 months later. But I would also,
for the record, that never happened. That never happened.
For the record, I'm always sad on the day you leave and try to make you not leave.
I know you do. And you have your ways of just really totally blackmailing me about that. But just with love, blackmailing me with love. That's beautiful. I love that. Blackmail with love is the one blackmailing that I let stand. It's fine. So, like I said, and I announced many times now, I did write a little introduction to you so that people get a little bit of an idea of who you are. This is by no account an objective kind of representation. It is a representation of you, the friend that I love very much and that I admire a lot. So, having said that, I realized that this can only become an anticlimax. But
you've really done a good job to talk it up before you start, Basti.
I know. 10 minutes and it's already an epic fail. Well, 10 minutes better than 9 minutes, right? So, are you ready? Are you ready?
You're not going to read it now, are you? I can't listen.
I am.
You're not gonna
I am.
In post?
Oh, you got it. No, I'm not going to do this in post. No, because the thing is, I write these things, and then you have to tell me if you agree with that or if you have anything where you're like,
no,
maybe.
Say it's like 10 years ago I met this idiot in Berlin and I could never get rid of him since.
Yeah, it's something like that, just with more words, basically. All right, so let me start. So here we go. And as I said, be critical afterwards. You can still tell me, that's the biggest load of bullshit I've ever heard.
I've been critical before.
Yeah, well. All right. So, Jim is a musician, photographer, and filmmaker from Scotland with a strong focus on social inequality and human rights. In 2007, he moved from London to Berlin and started his continuing love affair with this great city. He found shelter in the thriving Tacheles art community where he lived with his band members, the Myriad Creatures. Rumor has it. Sorry, it says rum there. Rumor has it, without water and electricity, you stayed there. I mean, I have to quickly just say something, just to be very clear. The reason why your introduction is quite long is because you have a Wikipedia page.
Well, which I would like to point out, I have nothing to do with, and and since it's in German, and we all know how much my German still has to go and to develop. So I'm very innocent, and I suspect that there's there might be some fake news on there.
That's exactly why you have to in the end tell me if this is also point out the things that didn't resonate with you so much. So rumor had it that you lived in the Tacheles art community without water and electricity. Jim truly is a man with very basic needs. Whether that is true or not, I can definitely still vouch for that. In May 2010, Jim split from the band to start his solo career, publishing his first album, Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, that very same year. This goes to show that Jim is also a man who follows his dedicated path, and rather than find excuses, he always uncovers all the reasons to confirm his choices. 2010 also saw the birth of his debut single, Memoirs from the Afterlife, and saw a soaring success across many important German radio stations, catapulting him into the top 100 of the national mainstream airplay charts as the only artist without a record label. It is also around then that his deep passion for film and video was kindled by producing multiple music videos for his songs, culminating in a series of musical collaborations for his album, The Hermit and the Hedonist, filmed in various locations across Berlin with befriended musicians paying tribute to the origin story of the album. Jim says about the series of video, and I quote here from Wikipedia, so there's something you can tell me if it's true or not as well later. And now I'm missing the quote. That is terrible. We might have to do that again. Okay, wait, we cut right here.
I'll be honest. It's like, my memory of that time is so blurry because there were some wild days that the missing quote is curiously appropriate, Basti.
Well, very good. I did find the quote now. I have a backup. Yes, I have a backup.
You got a backup quote. Oh, no.
So Jim says about this series of videos from The Hermit and the Hedonist, The truth of it is that there is little money supporting the project. So everything that we have made, including these videos, has been about people wanting to make and put something good back into the world for the love of it. I think this is still at the heart of all his work and endeavors, to just put a little bit of love into the world, regardless of monetary gain, meeting and befriending people along the way. And it is also around this time that I met Jim. 2012, Jim signed a record deal with EMI and published his third album, Lunatic Lullabies. After Universal Music bought EMI Records in 2013, his record deal was cancelled the same year. Devastated and disillusioned, I'm venturing out on a guess here a little bit. After he had just reached his biggest goal and seeing it go to shambles within only a year, Jim knew he had to reinvent himself and took the change as an opportunity. Film and video helped him get there and allowing him to take a more detached look at himself as a subject of his own creation. He has been running his production company, Kroft Films, since that very year. Jim started his Journeys project in 2014, traveling through China and East Africa, equipped with a guitar and a camera, documenting the beauty of human interaction facilitated by cultural exchange. It is, to me, one of the finest documents to the human spirit. Alongside the beautiful albums Journeys 1 and Journeys 2, he released 2 documentary films with the same title. Music and film had gained an even footing, it seems, to me at least. In 2015, Jim and I set out in Fonsi, there we go,
Fonsi!
to document the European refugee. Yes.
Hold on. This is. I think, since this is a formal interview, you should be calling Fonsi Alphonse.
That is very true. I think that is a very fair point.
Fonsi is very much a Spitzname.
That is true. I thank you for pointing this out to me. So let me read that sentence again, just quickly. So, in 2015, Jim and I set out in Alphonse to document the European Refugee Trail for a self-funded project. What had been planned to be 3 weeks turned into almost 2.5 months on the road. We both felt that human suffering cannot and may not be comprehended by the coldness of a numerical abstraction and wanted to engage with the stories of our fellow human beings looking for our help. Our resulting film, The March of Hope, ran to various film festivals and won numerous awards, thanks to Jamie mainly, who did all the heavy lifting with the editing while I was too busy setting up camp to live in Greece. There followed another documentary called The White Arrow, documenting his journey on the Trans-Siberian Railway, covering some 3,200 kilometers, 11 time zones, and playing 30 live concerts along the way. I highly recommend to watch all of these videos and films. If you haven't guessed by this very detailed introduction yet, Jim is a very empathic man who believes in a better world and the equality of all. Some people might therefore call him a dreamer. I call him a visionary. He has an ability to connect with people by showing a genuine interest in who they are and what they have to say. He treats his art as a means to an end, namely to even the ground between him and his fellow human beings. Also, he's the person who has spent the single most time continuously sharing a bed with me in Fonsi for almost 2.5 months. And this record yet has to be broken. Yes, I'm talking to you, Vicky. His latest song, Love in the Face of Fear, is a wonderful expression of how we can meet the many challenges the world is facing. And I'm very grateful to be able to use it as the theme song for the show, as they both share the same conviction. Mm-hmm. On top of it all, going out with Jamie for a Hefe, a wheat beer Bavarians like to take credit for, which, yes, that's true, a Hefeweizen, but you could just always call it a Hefe. So just, I'm just quoting here.
Well, I thought if you were saying Hefe, I could say Weizen. This is our connection, Basti.
Oh, okay, I get it now.
It was a gameplay. It was a wordplay. It was
an artistic endeavor that I totally smashed through the window. Great. Okay. So on top of it all, going out with Jamie for a Hefe.
Weizen.
A wheat beer Bavarians like to take credit for, which has become his signature drink, is an opportunity nobody should miss as soon as the table will be swarming with strangers who will leave you as your new best friends. All these reasons qualify Jamie more than anyone to be the very first guest on this show. And in that spirit, cheers, mate.
Salud and Prost.
Nice to have you here once again. So,
can I just point out that was such a long introduction that I've actually drunk half of my Bayreuther.
That was inevitably going to happen anyway.
It's only now that I'm realizing how hungover I might be after this interview.
Oh, well, I'm glimpsing that just ever so slightly as well, because I have almost finished like what seems to be 3 fingers of Lagavulin already. I'm not sure we should be advocating this, because people will think, I'm not sure this is...
Well, I mean, why on earth is this actually being recorded? Lost.
All right. So is there anything that stuck out where you were like, that's definitely something I would like to rectify?
Well, I think, thank you so much for taking the time to, it's like an emotional moment for me just to have a little bit of my own history recounted. And, some of that stuff, I was like, wow, that stuff is out. First of all, I was like, wow, that stuff's out on the internet. I didn't even know that. And then, and then the other part,
I didn't share all the videos that I found of you. Wow, that's some raunchy stuff there.
Well, and then the other part of me was like, that sounds really exhausting. But isn't that the way with any journey? You would, if you really knew what was before you, would you ever even bother to set out in the first place?
I think you would. I think you would. That's a very interesting question, I believe. I think you would. Because in the end, I feel it's very difficult for me to separate the moment that I have now and dissociate it with anything that happened in the past. Mm-hmm. And generally, I'm quite happy to be in the know. I know that's probably annoying to hear, but generally, I'm quite okay with being in the now. So, and if I take credit for the now, then I have to take credit for all of it. It doesn't work any other way.
Absolutely. So, absolutely.
In that sense, no, I would do everything the same way again. Actually,
no, and I think that's lovely. I think when you are before a journey, I mean, it is one of those paradoxes, because coming hand in hand with any journey. And it doesn't matter whether it's a metaphorical journey, or even the journey you make every day. There are so many different types of journey, like one of the most amazing journeys is motherhood, or an exploration as a documentary. Everyone is on this path, and obviously we're all in this time continuum anyway. But just one of those interesting things that I find is that every time I've stepped out, there is a passenger, which is a degree of fear. And, I even remember when we were setting out for the March of Hope, and, I can always remember when we set off from Berlin, and, Basti, you'll remember, you were such a sort of driver for us to sort of go out. And actually you've been thinking, for a while to do it with your dad. And, I was sort of, then we started speaking more and more and more. And I always remember like going out, and I remember sitting next to you, and you were in a sort of like, if you remember, a sort of very vivified state of mind as we were, we actually made 18 hours to get all the way to Serbia on the first drive, just kind of like trying to get eastwards. And, I think I drove about half an hour of that first shift.
But I think that is an absolute overstatement.
Übertrieben then. But I remember, like, I felt like, actually a lot of fear, just a lot of uncertainty about, sort of whether we would, find a role, whether there was, whether, what sort of lay before us. And, I think it was a very strange thing, sort of, from an artistic perspective, from a filmmaker's perspective, because, you're setting out and you're just so unaware about what your place amongst all of this, would be. And that was an element, that sort of drove us out. But, when it comes to journeys, I think, there is always that sort of sense of uncertainty. And I think that sort of capacity, we all have to make a leap of faith almost every day in our lives.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you do, I think, actually, to be honest with you, a huge part of life is also just to, tell ourselves we don't have to make a leap of faith. This is why we want security and safety and all of that. So that not every day feels like a leap of faith, because it can also be very exhausting. But I do believe, yes, in the end, if you want to, if you want to really do your own thing, and if you want to follow your own path, then that is inevitable, and you have to do that. Not maybe every day, but
sure,
at least at the right moments in your life, that at certain moments in your life, whenever you feel like you have to take a big decision.
Absolutely,
yeah, that is yes, and obviously, remember all of that very well. I do. It was also, to me, it was one of the very very big experience in my life, this whole journey with you. And I think it just made us even greater friends. I think after this, we're like, okay, fuck it. We're doomed to spend the rest of the life with each other. It's just like, there's no other way of seeing it. Okay, fuck it.
But I think that's right. I think, and I think, I think that was sort of like, sort of almost like one of the sort of beautiful paradoxes that came out of this is, the amount of sort of like different sort of friendships were formed, and the amount of sort of like, intimacy with so many different people, whether, sort of with refugees themselves or with, aid workers, some locals. And, I think that that was something that, when we were setting out, and when I was certainly, and I just speak for myself, but, had a sort of degree of fear before sort of what was ahead and how one might be involved. But, I look back and I sort of find it extraordinary how much friendship came out of this journey. And of course, how much our friendship deepened through this experience.
And, I think the beautiful thing is that the film that came out at the end entirely captures that. It shows exactly that. It shows exactly that out of this journey, if whatever it's worth, I mean, we're not giving answers to any of the questions regarding the politics or the policy around, around refugees in Europe, especially. But what the film shows is that we went on the road, and what we found were a whole lot of friends. And this is the wonderful part. Instead of, looking at it as an abstract problem at home on TV, it shows you that if you actually go out, you will find friendship, and you will find a lot of love. All that it takes is that you go from abstraction to something more real, something on an experiential level. And that is, I think, what the film has to offer, in my eyes, at least. And for that reason, I'm super happy that we made it. I'm so happy that we made it. Very proud of it as well, actually.
Well, I am too. And, I remember, like, I feel very blessed in my life that I've had the opportunity to sort of travel all around the world, and, obviously live in Berlin, which is a multicultural city. And, and so I was just, it was funny as we were just speaking and, about the sort of the formation of our friendship, and obviously sort of like different friendships have different chapters and different moments of intensity, and periods. And especially when you go on an experience like this, and, I certainly experienced things on this journey that I haven't come close to experiencing other situations. And, actually, like I was thinking of a few of the people that we met on the journey, and one of the people that I know the same with you that I thought of was Mohammed, who we met in Epically. And just for the listener, so when we arrived at Epically, which was this sort of gateway camp between Greece and Macedonia, which wasn't ever meant to be a camp, but when we were on the road, and this was actually, I think it was March 2016 by now, and all the European countries sort of shut their borders to refugees. So we were in this sort of makeshift camp called Epically, which sort of very quickly went from sort of 3,000 to 15,000 people, literally as we arrived. And, just on the theme of friendship, because obviously there's so many dimensions. Next to our van while we were staying in Epically, there was what sort of this little community formed, and we were sort of very welcomed into, what the Giran, exactly. And there was this wonderful man called Mohammed, who just, had these sparkling eyes, and must have been, I mean, how old would you say Mohammed is? In his mid-50s, late 50s?
Yeah, something like that, I would say.
And, I always remember that, this amazing man, and we sort of got to know him, and, Mohammed could quote from Shakespeare and from Dickens, and he was always teasing us desperately about our lack of, knowledge about literature and other subjects. And he trained in medicine and in law. And this wonderful man was living in this tent, absolutely sodden, cold. And, I think you would confirm this, that, we never saw this amazing man's spirit, drop for a second. And I had a very, very fortunate experience was that we met each other again in Frankfurt, because we were both asked to go down and to speak together about Idemini. And I always remember, having met Mohammed with his drenched shoes, and we were with him as he actually crossed from Greece, broke out of Idemini, and went. We walked through the mountains of Greece and into Macedonia, and went through all these experiences, with Mohammed. And I always remember, when I saw Mohammed again. And from sort of seven yards away, I could smell this incredibly powerful scent. And he came right over to me and he gave me this absolute bear hug. And he looked absolutely magnificent. I mean, he was just wearing so much scent that, it was absolutely wonderful. And he was so smart, and he just was this incredible gentleman. And, and the strange thing is, and it was very, very emotional. And then we spoke on the stage together. And the interesting thing for me is that, when we were actually in Idemini, at every stage, he was, joking and, and being this vivacious and effervescent character that you kind of couldn't believe. I mean, I think he taught us so much about the nature of courage and what it means to deal with hardship. And the interesting thing for me, Basti, is that when we were on that stage in Frankfurt, it was the first time that I ever saw Mohammed angry when he was talking about the sort of, the conditions that, they had to live through. It was the first time. And it was a very sort of focused sort of anger. It was, it didn't come across as anger, but I could feel within him this intensity. And it was amazing that he could draw upon that sort of later on. And yet during the experience, he was just so capable of sort of dealing, with the situation. And it was just so powerful to see him again. And, as you'll remember, I sent his love back over to you as well, because he had you very much in his heart still as well.
I do too. And Mohammed is actually somebody who could fill an entire podcast on his own.
Yes.
He's just like so much inspiration, I think. Mm-hmm. But you said so much about him as well that just really describes him beautifully. Like how his spirit was never crushed in all this time that we saw him there, and that is amazing. Generally, that is my experience throughout this entire journey. The firmness of not the firmness, that's not really the word, but the steadfastness, more or less, of the human spirit against all odds, despite everything that is happening and going on around you, and to still be, to be sharing the little that you have with people like us that have everything in abundance. That, to me, has left a mark that I will also never forget. And it humbled me like nothing else before. And I will carry this for the rest of my life, really, even though that it sounds super pathetic now and everything, also talking about your own movie and everything, but that's just how it is, So I think it's not an amazing experience.
I would say it's more a tribute, than something pathetic, because, I think that, when you witness the real capacity of the human spirit. And, there is no, and I don't mean this to romanticize it, because that would be totally false and wrong.
I agree with you. That's the danger, though, sometimes.
And yeah, of course, and you can't get away from from the human devastation, but nonetheless, I've certainly never been, in such a situation where I saw the sort of like completeness and the fundamental, the sort of quintessence of the human spirit expressed in such a sort of form. And it wasn't just Mohammed, it was so many different people. And, another one of the characters that we met, and you met her to start with, Wizam. And, this amazing woman who came from Syria, and, she'd fled, and she told us this, absolutely terrible story that she had seen, her best friend killed by ISIS and executed, beheaded, and his head used as a football. I mean, just, a type of story that you can't imagine. And she was an artist, and, with ISIS, art is banned, and you're not allowed to represent in this way. And so when she fled, she took these her canvases and she folded them up, and she hid them, on her chest. And she brought these canvases through, through mountains and rivers and, across the Aegean Sea and over onto Lesbos and then onto the mainland. And then when we met her, she was stuck in Idemini trying to get out from there. I couldn't believe how powerful she was, how sort of alive in the moment she was. And I mean, they were living in tents. They had the whole family there. They didn't know where they could go. And I mean, I couldn't almost understand it because it almost didn't make sense to me. Because I always remember when she showed us her canvases, these canvases that she'd, and she took them out and she unwrapped them and she unfolded
Beautiful.
them. And these huge, like viviscent, phosphorescent colors. And there was one, you remember, of the woman with her head rocked back. And it was so colorful. And it was called Revolution in light and color. And it was just absolutely mesmerizing. And it just
was a tango picture, though. It was based also on tango, like the red dress and everything. It was just amazing because tango, I think, if I remember correctly, the way that she described it was, a celebration of freedom. So it's just like, it was wonderful to see. It was wonderful to see her, to speak about her heritage. And to be honest with you, if I think about it now, if I think of Wissam and I think of Syria and all its history and some of the things that we are starting to think of Syria here because of how we look at the war that is going on there and everything, which is such a short depiction of any place, really, if you think of it only in terms of war. Like the richness in culture and art and spirit and character and all of that, and understanding of the Syrian heritage and history, it was kind of culminating in her. And it gave me really this amazing feeling of the place, thinking of her now, and her art. And that kind of brings us back to what this podcast is about as well, in a way, is like, art and how it can just, make a contribution in times of crisis. I think the experience that I had with Wissam in that sense was very, very deep for me and very, very personal as well, and something I wouldn't want to miss.
And I remember sort of, because I'd been, when I was going down, as I was talking about earlier, and when you were, making this epic, drive, this sort of 18-hour drive, when you just, had sort of like, you were so focused to kind of get east, you were just, on the mission. And, and I remember when I met with Zam and also Rezit as well, who brought over his his instrument and was playing, playing in his tent when we met him. And I just remember kind of, I'd been uncertain about, well, what's the role of art? What's the role of documentary, in the face of a humanitarian crisis,
just quickly, you're a very big reason for this podcast, because this question, I asked myself the first time, really, we asked ourselves the question together, actually, when we set out, for this documentary. So I think that's why this is also very relevant in terms of this podcast.
Well, and that's the thing. And the thing is, I always felt, no one becomes, an artist and works in the arts unless you believe in the sort of power of the art to sort of impress itself and to shape.
No, I'm just in it for the money. Just sorry. That's just me, though.
We all know that about your motivations. And but I remember when we're meeting with Zam and Resit and some other people. Just it was like I realized that that I was overthinking this, this whole question, because, I was like, how in the face of a humanitarian crisis could art have any type of role? And, and of course it does. It's self-evident it does, and you see the amazing work of, war journalists and correspondents and the rest of it. But when you're setting out yourself, you're experiencing these questions firsthand, and you're questioning everything. And you're exploring your own motivations, your own knowledge of the situation. Am I knowledgeable enough to understand it, to bring some
self-education? Yes.
And it is self-education. That was, and we set out on, on this journey because, we did not want to be learning everything that we were learning. Like, so
exactly. Can I just quickly, sorry, just for one moment, like that's exactly what it was. And I think no one's ever put it better than that. It was us deciding to go for self-education instead of being educated by others about the things that are going on. I think that was really one of the main things, the main motivations behind us spending almost 2.5 months in Fonsi together.
Well, no, that's right. And
Alphonse.
And we talked a lot about it, and I think, for I remember when we were talking, because I remember we had a Hefeweizen when when we decided to go, and I was, one of the things I was concerned about, and I think this is something that a lot of people can empathize with, because of course, we're all, in the modern age sort of bombarded with so much media on a daily basis. And one of the difficulties is that sort of prime access to your emotions can be sort of stulted or nullified or numbed most of all. And, you can kind of see that with the refugee crisis, because originally, when that sort of poor boy Alan Kurdi, when this picture went around the world, this poor boy washing up on the shore, it sort of struck the conscience of the world, and people were so motivated, and there was such an outpouring of empathy. Now, by the time, that was in 2015. Now, by the time we went out in 2016, the sort of political environment and this, was already changing, and there was a huge counter movement, against, which was defined by a lack of empathy of these people coming over. There's a counter movement against it. And that's sort of one of the things that has sort of boosted populism in Europe. It's given a huge talking point to the right wing. But, it was when we set out, one of the things that I certainly was going through, and I believe you were as well, and we talked about it, was combating that daily numbness that one can get from the news, because you're saturated with media, and you read the next story on whatever news agency that you read, and at some stage you start getting numb. And the paradox is that when when your heart starts becoming numb, sometimes the sort of intellect can sort of take over. And I think you see that a lot with the sort of rise in, of the extreme right, around the world, because, people, for instance, have, very often never even actually had personal contact and met a refugee or someone who's actually flown from a war zone, escaped a war zone. People have no idea about the reality of suffering that someone like Wissam had been through. I mean, you are one of my best friends in the world, Basti, and, she talked about seeing her best friend being executed, head uses of football. I mean, you can't imagine that, and I mean, and I remember in speaking with her when she was telling us this story, it was like, it imprints itself upon you in a different way. And at that point, it becomes part of your responsibility to take out these stories into the world. And so in meeting Wissam, in meeting Mohammed, one of the gifts they gave to me was to realize the relevance of what it was that we were trying to do. And the relevance included the doubts that we were having, the doubts that we were having in exploring our own motivations.
Now, just, the world is still moving and turning, anyway, regardless of Corona, and other things have come up as well. And one of the things, and I'm bringing this up because, I realized something through it as well in connection with that. Now with Black Lives Matter and the new movement that is, it's not new actually, but, now that it's just branding up again a little bit. Or quite a lot in the US right now and the world over, and it's so good that it does. And I do realize the problem that there is with two middle-aged white guys talking about Black Lives Matter. It's not like that's something that's lying on the street, and it is also a little bit part of the problem. But I did realize something through it, because since then I have been listening to music, to be quite honest with you, there's this playlist on Spotify. It's called Black Lives Matter, and I listened to it, and it's actually a great playlist. And there's one song in particular that just really gives me goosebumps, and it just kind of does something to me. And it's the song "Don't Shoot by the Game" featuring P. Diddy and, whatever his name is right now, and a few other artists, great artists, Wade, I think, as well. And it's really, it touches me very much. It's like, just, the lyrics to the chorus basically is, time to take a stand and save our future. Like we all got shot. We all got shot. throwing up our hands, don't let them shoot us, because we all we got. And if you hear this, like throughout the song, this song is just amazingly good at just relaying everything that the Black community is experiencing on a daily level, the kind of desperation and all of that, the pain that they have, but also the determination. It's all in that song, for me at least, right? It's a wonderful song, and it ends with exactly the chorus I just read, with a little girl singing it, like a little girl, and you imagine her to be 5 or 6 years old, and she's singing that. She's singing such dire lyrics, you know, where she basically throws herself in front of a gun to make a better life for the rest. And the reason why I'm telling this story also in such context is because the beauty of that is that, you know, I listen to the song and it is made by people that live this every day, like the Black community, and it relays their reality to me. Mm-hmm. It relays their reality to me, and I can empathize, I can see it, I can feel it as a middle-aged white guy that has never had any experience with racism in his life. Mm-hmm. And is entirely cut off from that living reality. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized this is what art is so amazingly powerful, or why it is so amazingly powerful. Because if you ever have any doubt of what is going on in the world, and you don't know why people are doing what they do, and you question it and it doesn't fit into your picture of the world, then one of the first things that you should do, go and find a piece of art that is representative of whoever is protesting, of whoever is criticizing something about their situation in society, and listen to it, look at it, play it, do with it whatever it means you to do with, and you will get a better understanding, and you will be able to develop empathy for whatever their cause is. And this is exactly what that song represents to me. And I think this is what holds true for art. And this was an insight that I had just lately with this that was incredibly powerful for me. So my question, I think, is where do you see, like, how have you come across anything lately? Anything like a piece of art that you feel very strongly about, that touched you on a very deep level, and that communicated something to you that maybe you didn't know before was there?
Well, I think for me, you know, all during this time, it's been
very long question. Sorry, by the way, very long.
Yes. Well, after we got through
did you get a third beer in the meantime? Did you? I mean, that would have been your time now, right?
I'm actually on the fourth, Basti.
Okay.
I think one of the things is that, you know, as you said, it's great, you know, to be aware, you know, sort of, you said middle-aged white guys, and, you know, but I think that's part of the important thing is, you know, people talking. I think that's part of the movement happening at the moment, really having, wherever you're from, whoever you are, you know, being a part and being, you know, renewing one's awareness. And, you know, when it comes to middle age, I think, you know, we'd point out that you're the middle-aged one. I'm a bit younger.
Yeah, that's the truth.
But, you know, but in parallel, while all this has been going on, you know, I've been editing the documentary that I shot in America in the 2016 election. And so that was 3 months going through the US, you know, during the rise of Trump. And, you know, and so, you know, when you sort of ask about the sort of, you know, the sort of the artistic moments, you know, I mean, there were so many times, for instance, I went into Charlotte just after the killing of Keith Lamont Scott, you know, and, you know, and I missed, you know,
I don't recall that particularly, which is basically showing what the problem is, really.
Well, it was another terrible moment when, you know, when a person of color was killed, but, you know, by police and in you know, the most questionable circumstances. And by the time I arrived in Charlotte, I'd come down from Ohio, and I'd been experiencing what was going on in the Rust Belt and trying to kind of get behind some of the reasons with the export of manufacturing in places like the Rust Belt, why people were getting motivated to vote for someone like Trump, and trying to kind of get my head around what was going on in America. And then all of this stuff was already going on, you know, as I arrived in America. And
so you were just there before the elections, right?
So
2016.
I was there for the 3 months before, for the 3 months before Trump was elected in November 2016, and and I remember sort of going to Charlotte and going to a sort of a Black Lives Matter meeting, and having this extraordinary. I was welcomed in and was welcomed in and allowed to document the conversation. And it was, it was really it was really the Charlotte of of a week before was with huge protests and riots and fires and anger. And the Charlotte that I discovered was much more sort of just in the deepest grief. And, I think, this moment is so important, because I think that, it's certainly the first time that I can recall that, back then I think, okay, there was another killing, and you read about it, in the news, and, you'd be shocked. And, as a European, you'd go, well, this just stuff just keeps on going on. But it wasn't like you were a part of it. And, obviously we're in the heart of a pandemic here in Europe, and, and it was, there was, but different on this occasion is that despite the pandemic, so many people went out on the streets in order to protest, this treatment and racism on a broader and wider level. And, and I think this is, it really is a massive moment, for human beings. And I think that, one hopes that the sort of movement that, the movement, it's not something new, this has been going, racism has obviously been going on since time immemorial. And, in America, obviously the civil rights, did the heavy movement in the 60s, did the heavy lifting. But, you can even see, when I was in Charlotte in 2016, this was a massive story, but it didn't, it was a mass story in the US, but it was a story. It didn't trigger this, the Black Lives Matter was already triggered at this point. It was all already in motion, but there wasn't this sort of, this really sort of like this broader appeal, like across the world, even though we were all, a lot of people were aware of it. I was certainly aware of it before I went over to America. And so, these sort of, it feels like a historic moment. And, of course, with any historical moment, you have to, look at it and consider it for a moment. It's one of my concerns when I look at this moment, as I look back at the sort of like the terrible situation with Alan Kurdi that one of the sort of things that sort of provoke this outpouring of empathy and shock in European society. And yet, you look at the plight of refugees at this point in time, and it's like, you're not getting, it's not in the news, not a hot story. It's, of course, there are people out there who are caring. I was out, the other night with a member of Sea-Watch, and, having a very, a deep discussion and finding out more. But, the outpouring of empathy is not there like it was before. There's been a counter empathy, which is manifested in very, quite the opposite, types of formation. You look at Germany, you have AfD as the main party, which is, amongst other things, sort of, anti-immigration, sort of anti-refugees, and so I think that, with the moment we have at the moment, it's very important that everyone is conscious that these movements, these momentums can kind of like can lose momentum. So I think it's important that whoever you are, you're out there thinking about it, conversing about it. And I think, I really value that you brought it up in this talk.
Yes, I think it's very amazing. It's very important because we see how many things are going on, and I think it's for me. I will be honest with you. There's a time where I do realize as well, and not that I'm only just realizing it now, is that I live a very privileged life. I think I have been aware of that all my life, really. But I think at the moment, it just comes more and more to my attention, even. Mm-hmm. And I see the things that I see that the world is aching, and it is in a lot of places. And just because it doesn't necessarily ache for me, doesn't mean that it doesn't ache for a lot of other people. And I think I really think that it is in all our interest. It is in all our interest to make everybody feel, at least comfortable on this planet and feel that they have the opportunity like anybody else. I think if we work on on a future like this, if we have a future vision, so like when I said, some people might call you or maybe even me a dreamer, I think I would call you a visionary, because believing in a better world and working on a better world is something that we will all benefit from in the long term.
Well, of course, I agree, and and I think that one of the apps, I mean, it sounds almost simplistic to say, but we have to deal with these core things that divide us, whether it be what you look at the left and the right, and you look at all of the different things, and particularly with the polarization, the hatred, the divide. But the characterization of that hatred and that polarization is an inability to converse and to speak with one another. And how do we build bridges between these different things? And the reason that it's so important isn't just because it would be nice to sort of, trying to, to fix, human history and so much of the terrible things that have happened, and the things that people have done to each other. And, must be also said that, the things that white people have done, to the world, the exploitation and colonialism and the rest of it. But beyond all of this, and beyond all of this, we have to tackle it, because you say about having a sort of idealistic sense or a dreaming sense, and I would certainly say that I've somehow held on to some of my ideals as I've grown older. But the thing is, all of this stuff, the paradox, is all of this, it's not a distraction, but we have to deal with these human conflicts, because we have a far greater evil and danger ahead of us in the shape of climate change. And all of how do we confront something like climate change, for instance, when there are so many people, in the world, when the population is expanding, and when we are so, necessarily distracted by the conflicts that we have, both within, different people, but also, when you talk about sort of, we're still feeling the effects of resource war and what happened in Iraq, all, those years ago, we're still feeling the effects of September the 11th. There are still many micro and macro wars happening with, countries, sort of repositioning themselves, like you look at Russia, trying to sort of like station and sort of own the sort of Arctic Circle, because they know that as climate change happens, that's where, more resources are going to be. And, they have a very sort of, long-term sort of view in history, I think. But, we have to confront these things that are dividing us, because there is not going to be a world for anyone unless we sort out this core challenge that we have, of a warming climate. And, even at the moment, with so much devastation and deforestation and desertification and animals, and wildlife and ecosystems being killed, and it comes closer and closer to home with, look at what's happening with bees in Europe. You are just seeing nature sort of weeping and crying before us, and this is the problem that faces all of humanity, and all of the rest of it. We need to learn how to come together, because we just have greater challenges. So, sort of racism, there's a woman, I spoke to, in America, and she was an amazing woman called Linda, and she was homeless, and she was African American, and she just said, racism needs to be dead and buried. We need, she was like, the people that have that generated and formed this, they're dead and buried. And I'm quoting from my mind here, and racism needs to be dead and gone with it. And of course that's, something we hope for. And it's, an idealistic position, because human beings, seem to always be in confrontation, but we have a greater challenge before us, and that we need to address. So we have big stuff before us.
Can I be honest with you? Everything that you just said now, what made me think of was, the thing that stuck out to me the most was to bring people together. And I think that is an incredible, that is absolutely true. And this is something that art can facilitate. I think that's the power that art has, to bring people together and to bridge over. And I think once you have managed that, then you can finally also have a conversation about things. Once you have established level ground. So that's when I wrote in your introduction today that your art as a means to an end, to level the ground between you and your fellow human being. I think that's exactly what you do, and I think that is exactly also what what are the wonderful ways of art can be and how it can be utilized. Not that I'm saying that art should be utilized in any way. Art can also just be for art's sake, and it can just be for beauty's sake. But we are talking at this in a context of what can art contribute in a time of crisis. And I think that's exactly what it can contribute. And I think one of the most beautiful testaments to that is really your Journey series, the movies, because you feel that you just set out on this journey. All you had was a camera and a guitar, and you played songs and you looked for those encounters on the streets of Beijing, of Shanghai, and you bridged over every time. And the moment when you feel that happening in those sequences in the video and in the film, when the first smile breaks, when they approach you, when you just get their attention and their interest, and it's sparked, and they just, at some point they are like, fuck that. I am just going all in with this guy because he has made an effort. So I'm making an effort. And those moments are so precious and so valuable, and they're so beautiful. And this to me is where you see how art can be utilized and can just be, just be used, and not used, but can just be you also a means to bridge over and to bring people together. And I think that's what we need. And I think that's why art is so incredibly important. And I think maybe now more than ever in a globalized world.
Totally.
Yes.
Well, and this is the thing is, one of the, you talked of sort of privilege earlier, and, one of the privileges, in a positive sense for me was that, through this project, I have just met so many people from so many cultures and so many different ways of thinking. And, that includes, like in America, you had one of the candidates out of the two presidential candidates, Hillary Clinton, talking about Trump supporters as, coming out of being a basket of deplorables. When I was in America, and you're talking, okay, and this was, one of the presidential candidates, Hillary Clinton very narrowly won the electoral count, even if she lost the overall,
she lost the electoral vote, but won the public vote.
Public, that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
I know. I'm sorry for being the smartest here. It's just like
no, not at all. I was actually trying to sort of to say it as clearly as that. But this is it was a real symbol. It was a massive mistake, because she was talking ultimately about nearly half the country that voted for Trump. Now the paradox is that she wasn't even visiting some of the Rust Belt states. There was a sort of like an assumption that she would win certain places, and she didn't put that effort and that energy that Trump put in. But that's by the by. When I was in America, and I traveled 8,000 miles around America. And I went around these, small towns and villages and spoke with people, and very often.
But that's also where America is, We very often think that America does the big cities. No. America is really like it's the villages, it's the rural areas,
and it's the education of the last election. And of course, the thing that she was so wrong about is that there were very, very two things. One thing is that there were very real reasons why people were voting for Trump. When you go to these ghost towns and these skeletons, towns where, the manufacturing has just left and people's livelihoods have been devastated. And it's very, very hard to be poor in America, poor anyway. And, in America, it's just an awful, awful experience that people have when they fall, through the sort of social safety net. And but the other thing is that, it's this assumption that, anyone that would vote for Trump is automatically, somehow a deplorable. I was over there. I can't tell you the amount of times that I was embraced into the homes of, Trump supporters and fed and, had a good time and a conversation. And don't get me wrong, I challenged them on the things that Trump was saying. And I saw answers that I would also say that I didn't feel like, for me, it's like, well, if someone is saying stuff that is so against my values, then I just couldn't vote for them because I'd be, so worried about what some of the things that Trump says, about minorities and so on, that I could never vote for someone. But, it's still a simplistic way of looking at it, because you have to look, people ultimately, whether we like it or not, they vote out of their wallets very, very often. They vote about whether they can feed their children or not. And you go over to America, and the reality is that so much manufacturing has been outsourced, from America to the rest of the world. And Trump felt it, and he saw it, and he saw, he brought out this sort of like critique of a globalized world, the world that we sort of like, have taken for granted during all our lives. And he realized that people were very disgruntled about it, and that those people were never being addressed, by the elites. And, Hillary Clinton couldn't have made a bigger mistake when she said that. And of course, the other paradox is that, in all those little towns that I went to, there was an absence of two things. One is there were no polling people ever in any town that I went through in those little places. And also, I never came across, a journalist, in those places. Because why? At that stage, at least, many of the journalists were drawn to the Trump rallies and the big stories and the WikiLeaks, outpouring of emails and all of this. And, there was sort of a failure of American journalism, because they didn't understand what was going on, and somehow I guess people just didn't travel, to these places. And and I say that as a sort of measured criticism, because there are things that inform this, such as it's very, very tough in journalism at the moment. There's no money in journalism. People aren't able to send people out like they used to. And I know very many brilliant journalists, and there's and it's one of along with doctors and teachers and nurses, it's one of the professions I hold in the highest esteem. But that doesn't make it immune from criticism. And there was a trick missed in the US election.
Yes, I agree. And what you're pointing out is also very valid in the sense that that what we very often lack is context. And we have become, I think, sometimes too complacent to look for the context, and because it is sometimes a lot more convenient to just go with very easy truths and
binary
contemplations. Binary. Yes, that's a very good word actually in that context as well. Very good. Yes, binary. Exactly. It's like yay or nay. Mm. And very often now I see also that people, especially here in Europe, they roll their eyes at the United States and go, they're stupid. The Americans are stupid. How can they deal with someone like Trump? Mm-hmm. The Americans are not any more stupid than anybody else in the world. I do not believe, and this is actually where racism starts as well. Like, you see a certain group and you're like, I know better. You are all stupid over there. No, the question should be, what is the context of what is going on there? Mm-hmm. What is the system? Who has power? How is education? Who is structuring education? Yeah. How are the media structured? What are the media contributing to an open and fair society? So there's all these questions that come to play. So rather than say, they're all stupid over there, sometimes we just shouldn't just abbreviate our time and go, that's what that means. But if we're really interested in what's going on over there, then it will take us some time and some effort to understand what is going on.
Well, this is it. One of the reasons I went over there was because, we'd been out on the March of Hope, and we'd been exploring the lives of refugees in Europe. And we'd also been, tuning much more in, because while we were on the road in 2016, it was a very different environment to what was going on in 2015, when there was a lot of societal empathy for refugees and for what was going on in these war zones, and a lot of embrace, and it was an amazing moment. But by 2016, people were becoming more right wing. The right wing was on the rise, and there was a different voice coming out. Now, Trump, Trump tapped into these, this type of movement and this type of, this other type of moment. And he was, he is the sort of ultimate, example of a modern populist. And that was one of the things that drew me over there. It's like to try and, to be a part and trying to just get beyond the sense of the election but much more the sense of what,
and get beyond people politics. Get beyond Trump in that sense.
Well, this is it. It's like and it's like when it comes to populism, it's another ism. But what is it that is driving people? And one of the huge problems I think that we have both with the left and the right nowadays, and this is where I see the role of the arts and the bridge of the arts, is that they can't speak to one another. And the fact is, you go to these places in places like America, and there are reasons, very real political reasons, that people are choosing to vote for someone like Trump, and they're willing to put, they put aside his comments, against minorities and the rest of it, because their lives are being so affected by these sort of micro and macro economic patterns and the rest of it, and the problems of the globalized world. Now, I'm not making a judgment on that. There's nothing for me that justifies any of this stuff that Trump says, in the cultural wars, the racist thing he says. There's nothing that I identify with.
But there are recipients for his messages. That's the interesting part. And why are there recipients for his messages?
And
exactly.
That's the point. And it's like, if like Hillary Clinton, you consider them all deplorables, you're not looking at the multidimensional reality that goes behind every single vote, because behind every single vote, there is a human life, and there's a human story, and often poverty or the fight to get out of poverty. And, it's, very often it's quite interesting because, very often you sort of look at Trump and read in the media, and you get these sort of like very, very off sort of comparisons to sort of Stalin or Hitler and the rest of it. And, I think Trump is a very, very different type of man to Stalin or Hitler, particularly because I don't see him as being particularly ideologically driven. I think he's driven from, actually a much simpler sort of source, a sort of like a form of narcissism. And, he's just a very, and he's very pragmatic politically. He will say the things that he thinks that will motivate people enough to go out and vote for him. But having said that, we are in a dangerous moment, like in society, because, so many of the trends that are going on, particularly, I live in Berlin, and, in Berlin in the 1920s, after the First World War, during the Weimar Republic, you had terrible manifestations of violence and inability to speak with one another. Everything was very polarized. Of course, you had the huge recession. You had the depression.
But you also had a thriving arts world. Just to quickly get in here, Berlin in the 20s was like an amazingly upbeat and swinging city as well at the same time. So there were like two very different things at play there,
and which related to each other when it comes down.
Yes, exactly.
When it comes down to this theme of the podcast, now art couldn't, and I mean this with big inverted commas, but it couldn't save the world from fascism. But artists made a play back then to play their part, and unfortunately,
I wish it had though. Yes,
I do. Of course, we all do. And. But this is the thing. So when you really think about the role of the arts and what it is that, we're trying to do now, where else is this capacity to sit with completely polarized ideas, with ideas that don't seem to make any sense or be able to fit in with one another, that seem to almost come from two parts of reality. And you see that in the left and the right. And what is the role of the arts? I think the role of the arts is to be the bridge. Back in the 20s.
Bring people together. Yes.
Back in the 20s, you had Die Brücke, who were, talking about being bridges between opposites. And Bastian, when we were going out on the March of Hope, we talked about this, it was a line that came from Marx, everything being pregnant with its contrary.
Yes.
And we've always identified in this that sort of any spiritual understanding, you look at something like, a basic formation of it is the yin and the yang, where in the heart of one thing, you find the seed of another. And this is the thing, is that we, Hermann Hesse has a wonderful line, which is, embrace, come what may, the whole world into your own soul, into your own heart. And, and that's the idea, to become whole, it includes embracing the ideas that are opposite to you, and it's like, there are so many forms of this. But anyway, I just think
that's very nice.
Well, I'm enjoying what you're doing because, it's like, I think we need to encourage each other in the arts, because it's not, art, like Wissam showed us, like on the March of Hope, art is not something indulgent and irrelevant and a Spotify playlist that is, in the back of a party anymore. People need to stand up. I made a short film in 2017 called Warum seid ihr so scheiße leise? Why is...
Sorry, I have to translate that. Why are you so shitty, silent, quiet?
Well, I think it's why.
So fucking, Eki. Why are you so fucking quiet? Exactly.
And it was addressed to the artist. It was like, you got to stand up. You got to go out and say your piece. Stop these pop songs, that are just, once again, putting a really cool beat and talking about relationships or going down to the coffee shop, whatever it is. You got to find a way to make contact, because there is a responsibility in the arts. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying to anyone what to do, because I think, as you said earlier, the arts has many, many roles. But, something I'm very encouraged by, and this is wonderful, you talking about this song in relation to Black Lives Matter. I do think more and more artists are standing up, and I've certainly been trying, I feed from, that sort of punk rock ethos about, I'm not punk in my music, but I'm punk in my approach. I have a punk rock heart, which is essentially be DIY, be independent. Do not let anything stop you going out to try and build those bridges, because I think it matters.
It absolutely matters. It absolutely matters, I believe. And I do believe also, I see I agree with what you're saying. I do believe that a lot of people are becoming a part of a public debate, and also artists, and it shouldn't only be artists. Don't get me wrong. It should be everybody. Everybody should be participating, and everybody that is participating, best of all, is looking for context within all the conflicting things that we find in the world, because the world is also a place of conflict, and to make them coexist with each other and to make them amend. I think it needs a conversation, and it needs, and therefore also needs people that believe in that conversation and try and make it happen. And I think that is very often, and not only by all means, like, don't get me wrong, because otherwise you're getting into this idea where they're all the better people, we're all the better people. It's not like that. It's just, it can facilitate it sometimes. And I believe this is what this is all about.
I agree. And if I may say, just like continuing that thought, you brought up Black Lives Matter, and we talked about, the sort of nature of how polarization works. Now, one of the things that, I think is very important when it comes to how we address racism is, I think that, for me, even possibly the key point of it is that before we point those fingers at other people, we have to address the racist inside ourselves. The fact,
absolutely, I agree. Absolutely.
Each one of us has prejudice inside of us, in some micro, some macro, some conscious, some unconscious, but every single one of us. And the big problem with, I think with the racism debate is that, and don't get me wrong, I think it's absolutely wonderful that everyone is on the streets and making a communal voice. And I was on those protests, and I will continue to be a part of it. But I think a key part of that is how one looks at oneself, and how one, chooses to confront, one's own, you talked about privilege earlier. Of course, that's another subject, but it's interesting because, in regard to privilege, I think people have a more developed sense of, okay, I actually need to recognize where my opportunities come from in life. And I think with regard to racism, it's very much those people on the right wing, they're racist. Those people that vote for Trump are racist, those populists. And it's never, racism has, it comes in multiple forms and, inside ourselves, and we have to address it, because
pointing the finger, we sometimes also avoid exploring our own inner self a little bit. It's so easy to point the finger at something else and somebody else, rather than also addressing the problems that you might have within yourself, with certain things. That includes me entirely as well. I'm trying to work through that as well.
Of course, and it's like, well, and this is the thing, is that, I think there are important things, like a lot of people, on the right wing haven't ever spoken, to a refugee, or, I look at myself and, I've lived in multicultural cities, London and Berlin, and I've been very lucky, through my documentary work and travels and tours and so on to meet people from all types of cultures. But, I met more people from the Middle East, like within the first week of the March of Hope than I'd ever met before. And I don't know, I think maybe one of the things, like that somehow, how can we really tackle, beyond art and talking about things, how can we really use technology in this modern world to create different types of conversation, break people out of their bubbles? And it's quite interesting because obviously, this conversations and this podcast is happening in the context of the pandemic. And, look at you, Basti, you're embracing technology in a way that you haven't done before, which,
who would have thought? Well, who would have thought? I mean, honestly.
Well, certainly not me.
You know what they call me? You know what they call me at my agency? Small, big shout out, by the way. Great agency. They call me digital granddad there. Can you believe that? So considering that, I think I'm doing quite well for myself right now.
Well, I do. And the thing is this is a thing. And, I think that, I'm not involved in technology, but, I'd like to, like we use Skype or Zoom to speak with one another. We use sort of like the sites like Tinder and Bumble or whatever to go out on dates. But I think, something that I'd like to see is some way where we can encourage people from different cultures and political backgrounds, to perhaps make some type of forum where people can go on and have a conversation with someone that thinks completely different to them. I mean, like every night I will read media from like from different sides. I will watch, like CNN and Fox, and it's interesting. You always see Fox talking about, CNN as being the mainstream media, but together they form the mainstream media, which is the paradox. And then outside
in the United States, yes.
Yeah, no, but of course. But the thing is that, you only ever get to some type of formation or sense of, again, in big inverted commas, truth by trying to bridge these different things, because between them and you see how radical radicalized American society is through these media organizations that cannot address each other in even the most basic forms of politeness. I mean, it's absolutely tragic, and it sets between them and the politicians, it sets a terrible example for all of society. But somehow we need to use technology, we need to use the arts, and we need to encourage people to actually have experiences with other people that makes them less afraid to us.
That's a wonderful way of saying that. And in that case, again, as well, it is like relating your own experience to somebody else. And what works with that quite well is in finding some sort of a creative solution to relay that information, that emotion, to empathize, to understand. So that brings me to something that I'm going to ask you after everything that we have talked about now. Do you think that the world needs more artists that believe and work towards a betterment of society?
I think that, I think it's a very interesting point, because I think that, like creativity, which is something available to every single human being and, as one of the palettes of potential that we have inside of us. But I think there is, through technology, a sort of form of democratization happening in the creative world, in that,
and everybody, sorry, just quickly, is creative every single day. The only question is, am I channeling it, just, how I channel it? I think that's the only thing. Everybody is creative in their own way every single day. So this is not like some kind of elitarian thing. And I'm just trying to point that out every time.
All I know is that, that creativity, like I was drawn to creativity, like as an expression when my mother became sick with secondary breast cancer and passed away when I was 19 years old. And that's what brought me to music. And
so you only started music really like this when you were 19? Yeah,
well, I was very late, and I've, and in some way, I've always been kind of feeling like I've been playing catch up, because, like when I went to London, sort of, in whatever year it was, 2000, and two, I think it was, but I always, I was always felt way behind as a musician because, so many of the musicians, have, had piano lessons when they're kids or got really into singing when they were 4 years old. And, and I was technically behind where they were, but then again, it's like, that's, the amazing thing is that, in something like rock and roll, you have something like punk music, something like the Sex Pistols who were, who were playing with 3 chords and, and I always kind of like, love the elementism of, what certain bands in rock and roll were doing. But in some ways nowadays, that elemental tools, like, you don't have to be a filmmaker to make an Instagram story or to capture a little bit of, you can get your phone out and, you can capture a story sort of right there and then. And, now,
yes,
of course,
creativity is actually being enabled by all the technology as well that we have right now.
It is.
Being critical of technology, you can be that. I am sometimes and stuff, but it also enables us in a lot of ways. So it's also, maybe this is a moment in time also to just say, wow, this is really enabling us and this is great. I think, that happens maybe not enough. From my side.
Sure. And I think the reality is that we just have to embrace every tool to get over these social problems and to, to really address the problems which are before us with, with climate change, because, it's, all I know is that, somehow, like was it Francis Fukuyama who wrote the end of history, and it's this notion that sort of like we can get over the moment of history. Now, I don't believe we'll ever get over history, but what I do know is that we need to, if we're ever going to sort of develop, with some of the things that we've talked about, the causes behind, why people have to flee their homelands over oceans, and mountains and rivers, as refugees to find shelter in other places, or how we're going to overcome the race, the racism that exists in society and, all of these different things. All I know is that I feel like, the generators behind so much of this is a sort of, I wouldn't say like I don't mean it like an original sin, but a sickness within human beings. We have a lust for power. We have Jung said it. I think there was only one televised or recorded, interview with Jung. And he said, man, he looks at the interview and he goes, man is the great evil. Man is a great sickness. And, and Jung didn't mean that man is sick, but, what he meant, if you understand his writing, is that, we have the potential for incredible darkness. Now, creativity, is one way, psychoanalysis is another way, yoga is another way. There are lots of ways, but whatever it is, we need to be able to get that dark guy, sticky stuff, that's in our subconscious, and so often, gets stuck in there and causes us to hate another or project our anger onto another. Someone's taking the world away from me. They are the cause of all of my problems. And so often it's our, it's spiritually speaking, it's, so often, if you read any great spiritual writer, the thing that you hate another, the reason that beyond all the layers that you have a hatred of them is because they're reflecting something that you hate in yourself, and I think what creativity does is it, and I can certainly say this for myself because, you look at sort of Faust, Goethe's Faust, but Faust being a much older, sort of, story and emblem and symbol. But, Faust is wrestling with the darkness in the human spirit, in the underworld, between paradoxical, conflicting energies that, can transform him and potentially transform the world, but are at the same time very, very dangerous. And his lust to, transform the world, kind of, Marshall Berman talks about it, about, this modernity being this thing that is, transforming the world, but it has no sense or thought about the little guy, and that's what's happening, in America. It's like the people that are being affected by these massive globalized forces, inverted commas, the little guy, or, they are also going, well, look, this isn't working for us. And this whole like Hollywood elite thing or the coast elite thing, it's not working for us anymore. And, fundamentally what Jung was saying is that, we have these dark forces, this black bile, this green bile within our subconscious, and we have to go in and find ways to transform it, like the alchemist did, transforming mud into gold, and that is what the journey of psychoanalysis, or the journey of creativity, or of yoga, or whatever it is. But we need to give these things. It's what you're doing with your podcast. You're giving people you're exploring how the arts can make a difference.
How we can transform the world a little bit.
Exactly.
But also being very, very aware that, that this might be a very failing, attempt. And I'm totally fine with that as well, because with everything that you do in life and with art, I think you always have to be prepared to really epically fail. Like, I think it doesn't go any other way. If you're not prepared to epically fail, then don't set out to do anything. So this podcast, it might epically fail. And I'm totally fine with that. At least for the time being. I will lick my wounds later if that's the case. But I think that is one of the things that you have to be prepared to do if you really feel that you have something to contribute, and you don't think of the hows and the whys so much, but you just want to be true to form. I think you got to be prepared to epically fail.
I sort of look back for a moment, on my own journey as in life, and as an artist, as a musician, and back in two.
Just pouring myself another Lagavulin, by the way.
Well, I think we could all hear that, Basti.
It's not quite like you sound earlier, like with a beer. My God. I mean, I'm still thinking of it. My mouth is drooling. I'm just saying, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
We're all judging you, Basti.
Also, that's fine. That's entirely fine. It is part of epically failing, being judged. No worries.
But that's, I look back at my own life, and, I can remember, the culmination of my sort of young musical life, if you like, when I'm talking 10 years, my 20.
That sounds like you should publish a greatest hits very soon. Just saying.
Well, great. I don't know if you could technically put the word hits in it, but I'll take it,
We'll make it work somehow. We will pull through.
I'm very much in the Van Gogh school of thinking. I'm like, a lot can happen after you go, you just need to get rid of an ear or two.
It's also a very beautiful attitude, I have to say.
I got my at least back then, what every musician aspired to was to get a major label, which would give you a bit more kind of, get your music to more ears, because back then we were all really dependent on sort of more old-fashioned sort of media, and of course, it was the culmination of my musical life when I got my major label deal with EMI. Now, my deal with EMI came out on 30th of March, which was my birthday, 2013. And that was when the record came out. And I got a call on the Monday, and I'd been out that weekend, I'd been in Berghain, and I remember kind of like, a whole load of stuff. I think Rummel Snuff was there, and I remember seeing my great friend, Lucas Dietrich, and all types of, wild sort of characters. And, and I always remember I got a call from my manager, Jasper, at the time, very well. And he was like, Jim, I was like, hey, this is a Monday morning. I mean, I think I'd slept for sort of a couple of hours, and, was staring at the abyss in
that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Stuff. Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, Jim, you don't have a record deal anymore. And I was like, what do you mean? It came out at 6:00 on Friday. I mean, I was always like, well, why do they release an album on a Friday anyway? And he's like, you lost your deal. And I said, well, how could I have lost my deal? It's only technically been released. The album's only technically been released for an hour, And so I was the last artist to ever release an album on the old EMI, because it was bought by Universal. And of course, the first thing they did was they got rid of all of the sort of medium to smaller artists like myself. And they kind of course, kept the Radioheads and the Beatles back catalogue, and Eric and the rest of it, I mean,
it's just the small guys, really. I mean, really.
Well, I still think they made a big error, Basti. I think that time will tell, and they'll go, we had old Jimmy, and we could have had that on the catalog.
Oh, but can I be honest? And this will sound like sucking up now, but I will gladly take that chance. It's like, no, I agree with you. they made the biggest mistake in their lives. Like I just don't see why they would not have. I mean,
Well,
they have never seen you play. They have never seen you perform. They never really took a moment to really listen to what you have to say.
But these
it was just based on statistics, whatever else. In my opinion, I don't know. I have no idea of the process. But
in the context
anyone throwing you out of the record deal is greatly mistaken. That's my honest opinion.
I think the thing is that, like in the context of the conversation and, these sort of like plastic notions that we have of, success and failure, the reality is that, okay, everything that I sort of put sort of like, those 10 years of work was about getting that, deal. That was my ultimate dream. And it was a very curious, it was a very curious.
I remember that very well.
Yeah. And it's a very curious experience because, I guess that like, like it was a very strange thing because, I was already over the age of 30 and it's quite unusual to get a major label deal after the age of 30. And,
there's so much wrong with that. I know that you're right, but there's so much wrong with that. I mean, you're just starting living when you turn 30, basically.
This is the thing, the pop industry is ageist. And, and the strange thing was, it was a very particular experience to go through because, to lose, to achieve your dream and this archetypal day in your life where you release your album on this wonderful, label that all of your favorite musicians were on. And you think, well, I've somehow arrived in the world. It was a very humbling experience to have it taken away, less than sort of 48 hours later. But, the thing in looking back is that, like when, and of course, like at the time, it's like, you feel like a failure. And of course, you project onto yourself the reasons, but ultimately, the world's a much bigger place and there were macroeconomic forces with, all the bigger labels dying out and kind of like eating each other like, like the sort of T-Rex does the velociraptors, in Jurassic Park, the Universal buying EMI who was totally broke. But the paradox is that, having gone through that moment of absolute failure, combined, I might add, with, one of the worst sort of, come downs and hangovers of my life. But the paradox is that in some ways, I feel that was the start of my journey, like not to dismiss anything.
Because you saw an opportunity.
Well, I just had in my limit,
in that life's challenge, basically.
Well, exactly. And it's like, you either, get up and you dust yourself off and you look for a different experience in life, or you make a change and you do something different. And that's also valid. It's so valid in sometimes to change course or to change path. That happened, in my circumstances, that I simply just kept on writing songs. And, it was a strange thing because, like I'd started writing songs when mum got sick and passed when I was a teenager. And there was a lot of pain during that period because I kind of had the sense that I needed to kind of start again. And I was like, God, should I pack it in and do some, try and find a sort of, more stable sort of way of life or whatever. But, I kept on writing songs and I just couldn't ignore that I was writing songs. I was like, I feel like I'm meant to be doing it.
Thank God that you did.
Well, thank you.
Thank you that you did. Thank God. Anyway.
God or whoever you believe in, Bastian. I know that
exactly.
Whatever Faust and forces are play here, those forces as well. Mephistopheles is around.
Just saying. Christopher Marlowe came up with that just before Goethe did, actually. So we give it all to the Great Britons in that sense. I mean, Faust.
Oh, well, hold on. That's a segment of the podcast I'm going to be cutting out. And it's like, oh, wow. Wow. A German said something nice about the British. This is...
This happens far too seldom these days with all Brexit stuff going on.
I don't have much to say about, much good stuff to say about Brexit, as you know.
No, to be honest with you, I think in the long run, nobody really does. I think that in the long run, we're realizing that nobody's really winning from this. Anyway, that's my opinion. And that's a whole other topic, which I think will probably be for another podcast, but please continue. Yes.
What's the question, Bastian?
Well, anyway, no, there's no question. I think fair enough. I did throw you off the topic a little bit, but I wrote something down. I think that we'll just tie in with that again. And I think it is, we are very often I find myself to be focusing a little bit, maybe too much, on how art can help in a time of crisis on a global, political, societal level. I think what you just mentioned is very, very interesting, because not only does it do that and can it do that, but I think it can also help you dealing with your personal crises. And I think this is exactly, and you are a wonderful example of that. Not that I want to make you an example. An example always has something so generic. It's like, yeah, you're just like everybody else. I don't mean it like that, but I think you have faced a personal crisis, and you came out all the stronger, like you just pointed it out. You were at a time in your life after you had just recently, really 48 hours ago, like you said, just grabbed your dream, like have a record deal with one of the labels that you personal heroes have been signed to. And then just within 48 hours, it was a little longer than that, but 48 hours, it just falls apart, and you're like, wow, so that's been it. Like, what do I do with this? And this is what I love so much about you. Instead of just, feeling self-pity, you think, what can I do with this? How can I come out on top of all of this? And then you experiment, you put on your camera, you explore, you see yourself. And this is, I think, what I said in the introduction as well. You see yourself as the subject of your own creation. And in that sense, you go from abstraction and I feel sorry for myself into something active, something creative, something creational even. And you see yourself from a distance as well, because you're making yourself the subject of your own art. And this is exactly the power that art in general has. And this is why I want to point out every time that art is nothing where you are like, wow, okay, this is for some people that went to art school. It's nothing like that. It is nothing like that. I think it is a basic necessity of human life. The only difference is that some of us do it maybe more consciously because they went to an art school, and some people do it to a different, do it on a level every day, but don't realize that they're being artistic and don't give themselves any credit for it.
Right.
And you are just one of the people also in that particular circumstance that I'm pointing out that just, I think, nailed it. You did it, and you saw the chance of, wow, I can film. I'm so much more than a musician. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a photographer. I can get a camera. There are so many opportunities out there that I have not even explored yet. And you did it. You sat down. And this is, to me, a beautiful way of seeing as well what the power of art really entails for every single human being on this planet.
Well, Basti, thank it's sort of really moving.
That was a long question again, by the way.
Well, no, it's really moving to be self-reflected, because, like, I think, through this podcast is a chance for me at this point in my life to sort of, look back over my sort of life and experience and journey and work to this point. And I think that with this sort of idea of one of the sort of key journeys for me is really to be sort of to find a way to sort of like to overcome this sort of, again, another binary, another polarity, this idea of success, of failure, this idea of either or. And, because, this is the thing, is that, I look back and there is nothing I'm more grateful for in my own personal journey in the arts than the fact that I got sacked off by EMI and that I sort of had to start again. And, the thing is, it's like, look back at the, like the life of a musician is that, if you have like, really deep success as a musician, of course it's a wonderful life, but, why do so many musicians, damaged ones, and I was certainly a damaged ones, why do they end up topping themselves, killing themselves? It's because, or experiencing drug addiction and this type of thing. It's because, well, there are so many red carpets and sort of, stuff written about and, it becomes a very narrowing world. And, I never experienced, any type of success on that level. But in some ways, let's say there was a different world where I experienced, some of those things as a young man that I dreamed of, that I wanted. At that stage of my life, I was very much sort of like, living by the idea of doing rather than being. And when I lost the deal and had to sort of have it, let's call it an experience of failure, even though I don't like the word, I sort of had to really readdress.
No, because there are no real failures. I think that is something that we just like to see binary. That's binary thinking. Exactly. Just going with what you said.
Well, exactly. And to kind of like, and to sort of like get beyond this idea of this sort of this polarity. And of, also asking who I am, and to basing my life much less on what I could achieve or do or some particular, thing, and to examine and my relationship with the world in terms of like, well, rather than who I as through what I do, but I as who I am, this relationship between doing and between being. And so I kind of, up until that point, I think I was, probably over concerned with, with the sort of young man's zest of proving oneself to the world and the rest of it, and that you could make it and all this type of stuff. And the wonderful thing is that through that sort of, again, inverted commas experience of failure, what maybe the eyes of the world would look at you, it gave me the chance to reformulate myself and to realize that I didn't want to be, being a musician, the reason I love my film and photography work especially is because I get to go and be in other people's stories and to explore their stories. I went and interviewed an artist today. I did the job for Fête de la Musique, and we spent, an hour and a half just talking about her work. She's called Stereochemistry, an amazing artist saying amazing things.
I'll link to it in the description.
Yeah, and you get to, and it's so humbling, and you learn so much from other people. And, certainly in my life, it was a paradox, because all during, I wasn't just hoping to, to be sort of successful in the rest as a young man. The other thing that I was doing in parallel with that is I was in a long journey in psychoanalysis and in therapy, and trying to kind of get to a stabler way inside myself. So this thing is, when I lost the deal, it kind of happened concurrently after already about 8 years of sort of ongoing psychoanalysis, trying to deal with some of the darkness that I'd been sort of, had lived when I was sort of growing up, and some of the things that sort of damaged or were difficult to deal with. So this point was a very significant point, because on the one hand, I was becoming more healthy, which allowed me to sort of get less obsessed with my own journey and to embrace other people's journeys, but also to have a much more sort of living sense of being within myself. It's an ongoing journey, I don't think that journey ends until the day you die. But
I think, I can just vouch for that as well. Like, the thing that really, again, what brought this broadcast to start was just my personal experience of limitation, in the sense that all of a sudden, like, all human interaction was kind of deemed, almost immoral, because you had to obviously protect everybody else, and we had to be aware of each other's well-being. I think that's pretty much what it was for me, at least.
Right,
aware of each other's well-being more than anything else, and then coming to a realization that, okay, things have changed so significantly and so dramatically. I think, like, it hasn't for anybody else, at least that I know. And now, again, I know that I am speaking from a limited point of view, because I'm living a privileged life in that sense. So I think for other people, most probably this is not the worst and most terrible thing. I'm not even sure it is for me, but on a global scale, though, that it just involves everybody, and everybody feels it, and that it really affects so many people all over the globe is something that was quite unparalleled for me at that time. And then I did realize as well, though, that everything that gave me comfort, everything that gave me just an amazing amount of consolation and catharsis, if you will, was art. It was, I saw things that I had never seen before, like things that were only prompted by this crisis, that wouldn't have happened if this crisis hadn't taken place. And not to wish that this crisis would be there for a better effect or whatever else. But it is here.
But the reality is
exactly
that,
the reality is here.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there are no hypotheses. There is no like, I wish it hadn't been this way. There is also a way of accepting just the way that things are. And the way that things are, what is the beautiful thing that sticks out to you? And the beautiful thing that stuck out to me was that I was just really deeply moved by some people's performances, like online performances, like, and I've also said this before, like Alicia Keys, so bless her. Like, I love her. Like the song Good Job that she did. It is something that is staying with me for now and forever. Like in this moment of need, when everybody was looking for some sort of like, how are we carrying on? For me, it was art that really, helped me keep my sanity and everything after everything was changed. And now after everything was like you never would have thought things could turn out. And I mean, that I'm in art just for the money, like I pointed out earlier. But for the first time in my life, I realized, hey, maybe there's something else to it, Maybe
thanks to Coca-Cola for sponsoring.
So maybe there's a little more to that, It's just something that allows me really to bridge over. And the beautiful thing of it was that everybody, at least so many people, it showed me that people overcame those distances, those social distancing in that sense, maybe is not entirely wrong, by coming up with creative solutions to their status quo and how things were for them. And that was one of the most beautiful things that I have experienced, despite all the terrible facts and realizations that came in the wake of it. And then we come back to, the life, to life as being a contradiction, and to be, being able to amend those contradictions in life. I think this is one of the main things, really, to come to a point where you can amend those contradictions. And
and I think on that subject, it's how we value the plight of the sick and those that have passed, those that have died, is by going on and living and choosing new ways to recommit to our life and how we can be in the world, there's some people I spoke to have a sort of sense of guilt about sort of like actually some things going sort of quite well or reinventing during the pandemic. But I think it's quite the opposite. I think it's how we pay tribute to those who are sick and dying. My mum said it to me before she died. She said, look, I just, she always, even when she was sick, wanted me to keep on living, keeping on getting out in the world. And, I've certainly felt the influence of her, of course, her life, but also her death in trying to do make the most, because our stay here is brief. It's very short, and we mustn't ever forget it. And we have to live with that every day, that sense of mortality. Keep living, keep going, hopefully keep loving.
Yes, hopefully keep loving. I think this is the main commitment in life, really. And if I think about it now, I think this should be the main commitment in life. And this brings us kind of full circle from the beginning to now. And that's why I believe that your song, Love in the Face of Fear, it is one of the songs that should become an iconic song of our time, because it is, I do believe it holds the answer to so many questions that we have. And it was an absolute pleasure to have you here and to have you on the show. And thank you so much for sharing all the insights and your experiences with me and with everybody that cares to listen.
Thank you, man. Lots of love.
And with this, we've come to the end of the very first ever historical episode of the Yellow Van Stories. What is a giant leap for me is, well, I'll spare you the rest. Thank you very much for coming along on the Yellow Van today. We hope you enjoyed the ride. For a limited time only, Jim's awarded film, A Conversation with America, is available on YouTube for free. It is an unbiased, colorful kaleidoscope upon which Jim sets the stage for all Americans, excluding no one, and therefore overcoming the pitfalls of our societal echo chambers. Hard to come by these days, don't you think? Being true to his words, to become whole, you have to embrace the ideas opposite to you. It is an inspirational film that I can't recommend enough. So go and watch it and support Jim's work if you can. If you want to support Fonsi with a bit of petrol money, you can do so on patreon.com/yellowvanstories. If you have your own inspiring story to tell, or you know somebody who does, get in touch with us on yellowvanstories.com, where you can also leave us your general feedback or ideas for improvements. I'm sure things will come to mind. We hope to welcome you back next week for a brand new episode. We'll be keeping your seat and we'll be cooling that imaginary drink of your choice. Please note, a selection of teas and instant coffee is available as well. Until then, stay healthy, keep loving, and always remember, we're all in this together. Now, take it away, Jim.